Have you ever wondered how psychologists figure out what we actually do in our daily lives, not just what we say we do on a survey? Well, today, we're diving into one of their most powerful tools, the art of observation. It's all about watching human behavior as it happens, right out there in the real world. I mean, think about it. If you ask people if they recycle properly or if they give up their seat on the bus, most of us would say, of course. But is that the full picture? To get to the truth, you can't just ask, you have to watch. And that simple idea is the absolute core of observational research in psychology. All right, so here's our game plan for today. First, we'll look at what it means to be a fly on the wall. Then we'll walk through the big decisions every researcher has to make. After that, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of how you actually capture the data, make sure it's reliable, and finally, we'll size it all up with the pros and cons. Let's jump in. Okay, so Section 1. What exactly is this fly-on-the-wall method? Well, it's all about a researcher systematically watching and recording behavior as it unfolds naturally. It's an amazing alternative when you just can't or shouldn't run an experiment. So here's the official definition for you. Now, the most important word on this slide is systematic. This isn't just chilling in a coffee shop, people watching for fun. No, this is a structured, carefully planned scientific method designed to get rich, authentic data that a tick-box questionnaire could never, ever capture. Right, so you've decided you want to observe people. Brilliant. But now you're at a crossroads. You've got some massive decisions to make right at the start, and these choices are going to shape your entire study. Your first big choice is where. Are you going to go for a naturalistic observation? This means watching people in their natural habitat. A school playground, an office, a shopping center. The huge bonus here is realism, or what psychologists call high external validity. But the catch? You have zero control. The other option is a controlled observation, usually in a lab where you can manage things, but it all feels a bit less, well, real. And a perfect example of a controlled observation is one you'll definitely know from the attachment topic, Mary Ainsworth's strange situation. It all happened in a lab playroom. The researchers could control exactly when the mother and a stranger entered or left the room, all while they watched the baby's reactions through a two-way mirror. It gave them tons of control, but you have to ask, how natural is that for a little kid? Okay, next decision. What's your role going to be? Are you going to be a participant observer, where you actually become part of the group you're studying? This can give you incredible deep insights, but there's a real danger you could lose your scientific objectivity. Or are you going to be a non-participant, staying on the sidelines and watching from a distance to keep that professional detachment? And finally, the last big one. Do they know you're watching? In an overt observation, everyone knows they're part of a study and they've given consent. In a covert observation, they have no idea. Now, you might get more natural behavior with a covert study, for sure, but as you can imagine, it raises some massive ethical questions about deception and privacy. Right, you've made your big calls on setting, role, and awareness. Now for the practical stuff. How do you actually turn what you're seeing into hard scientific data? You can't just scribble in your notebook, the kids were naughty. That's not going to fly. You need a system. And that system starts with behavioral categories. You have to break down the behavior you're interested in into tiny, observable, and measurable pieces. So a vague concept like affection gets turned into a concrete checklist: hugging, kissing, holding hands. It has to be so clear that there's no room for guesswork. Either it happened or it didn't. Simple as that. Just look at this table. It's a perfect example. Instead of just noting down students were off task, the researcher has this super specific checklist. Are they on their phone? Yes or no. Are they talking to a friend? Yes or no. Each one of these categories is measurable and objective. This is literally how you turn watching people into numbers. But that brings up another problem, doesn't it? Real life doesn't happen in neat little boxes. It's a continuous, flowing stream of action. Even with the world's best checklist, it's pretty much impossible for one person to see and record absolutely everything. So, what do you do? Well, you use a sampling procedure. There are two main types. First, there's event sampling. That's where you just put a tally mark next to a behavior every single time it happens. This is awesome for behaviors that are quite rare. The other option is time sampling. Here, you only record what's happening at set intervals, like, okay, every 30 seconds, I'm going to look up and tick what I see. This is way better for behaviors that are happening all the time. So you've been out there, you've done your sampling, you've collected all this data. But how do you know if it's actually any good? How can you prove that what you recorded is an objective fact and not just your personal biased interpretation of what went on? Well, this is all about reliability. And the key phrase you need to know is inter-observer reliability. It's basically a fancy way of saying you need a second opinion. You get 2 or more people to watch the same event, and then you check if they recorded the same things. If you and I watch the same kids in a playground and our tally charts look really similar, we can be confident in our data. If they're wildly different, something's wrong with our system. And there's a really clear process for this. First, all of the observers get together and make sure they agree on what each behavioral category means. Then they watch the same thing at the same time, but record their data separately, no peeking. Afterwards, they compare their recordings. And finally, you do a statistical test to correlate their scores. And here's the magic number you need for your exams. A correlation of 0.80 or higher means you've got good inter-observer reliability. Now, this whole process is super important because it helps us fight against a massive problem in observation called observer bias. That's when a researcher's own hopes and expectations actually make them see what they want to see. Having at least 2 independent observers checking each other's work is the absolute best way to keep the data objective and scientific. Okay, let's bring it all home. No research method is perfect, right? So for those crucial evaluation marks, you need to be able to weigh up the good stuff and the bad stuff about observation. So on the plus side, observations can have fantastic external validity, especially the naturalistic ones. What you see is probably what genuinely happens in real life. They also let us investigate things that would be completely unethical to set up in a lab. You can't start a riot just to study aggression. And you get this incredibly rich, detailed picture of real human behavior. But of course, there are downsides. We've talked about the ethical minefield of covert studies and that sneaky observer bias. And then there's maybe the biggest limitation of all. Observation can tell you what is happening, but it can never, ever tell you why. You can see a person acting aggressively, but you don't know the cause. For that, you need a different method, like an experiment. So what's the bottom line? Observation is an absolutely invaluable part of a psychologist's toolkit. It's how we capture life as it's lived. But its scientific value, its credibility, all hangs on the researcher making smart, systematic, and ethical choices from start to finish. So now you've got the blueprint. I'll turn it over to you. If you could be a fly on the wall anywhere, studying any human behavior, what would you choose to investigate? And more importantly, how would you design your study to make sure your findings were rock solid? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.